Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome to this. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome to the Setzler Subcommittee. We're going to, we've still got some versions of SB 591 committee substitute to print. So we're just going to, we're on standby till those get done. But we will start here momentarily. I would envision maybe 2 minutes or so we'll get started. We can talk about this generally, and then we can dive into the details. I just appreciate your standing by. Chair would like to recognize Representative McLaurin for some committee reflections.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I figure, we could just stand by, but we're all here gathered for the same purpose together, and a couple of us are not going to be coming back. And so, time like this, it's worthy of reflection on what we liked, what we didn't like about the experience. Mr. Chairman, do you have any particular highlights of your committee service on Judiciary and non-civil you're reflecting on in these final days?
His monologue becomes a cross-examination here. No, we will. There'll be ample time to do that. I don't know if this is the right time to do it, but it's been a pleasure serving with you.
I have to say that as meta things go, it's so appropriate that I tried to do something on your committee, and you were like, you were not recognized to do that, right? Like, that's beautiful. So
this has been a wide open committee. This has been freewheeling, and I think you recognize you've had more of a chance to have your mic turned on in this subcommittee than perhaps anywhere in this building. So.
I think this very exchange is a testament to that, quite frankly. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, welcome. This is the Setzler Subcommittee has a reputation in this building for being that way. This is if you're a high school kids watching online, it's like watching paint dry. If your ox is being gored because you're sitting on one of those seats and the bills are being amended that you thought there was consensus on, it's a really exciting place to be, right? Representative McLaurin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to sort of further elaborate on your point about the unique nature of the subcommittee, it's a place where time sort of doesn't exist, right? I mean, you think about the movie Inception, right? There's sort of like the main level, and then you go down and there's like the elevator level and the ski slope level. Setzler Subcommittee is sort of like the deep beyond, right? The sort of fourth level where you can grow 50 years older, and it's like a day, right? And I worry for bills that come here, right? Because you wonder, is it going to make it out? Is it going to ever wake up and come back to life?
The gentleman flatters me. That's the exact. In fact, I've said before talking to folks, I said, time needs to be the variable. Excellence is the constant. Time is the variable, and that's how we find our way there. Just takes time sometimes.
I'm hopeful that your bill gets out, though. I think it will. Yeah.
So. We're going to be working to do LC 280526S as those are being printed. Just an update for those, and I know that the author is waiting for his version to come back, and we're going to have one available for everybody in the audience. Today, what we're doing is there's been broad consensus on one of the components of the bill. The component around which there is broad consensus is the issue of the $100 cash limit being re-invoked. There's, of course, some carve-outs where that's not going to be available. That's going to be in the bill. We're going to move forward from subcommittee today. There is, in fact, emerging consensus, I think, around the catalytic converter piece, but the standard of a per se crime by virtue of having possession of a catalytic converter, there was not consensus around that. And we were working on language. I think we're close, but we were just not going to whip something out that was not ready for prime time. This is a criminal statute. It's got to be airtight. It's got to be, workable. And I've been in this committee long enough to see imperfect committee work really lead to Court of Appeals cases that come out and really show that we've not done our work. I want to make sure we've got something that's airtight, both in court and it's going to stand up to appeal. So we're going to take our time on that. Also, with that Catalytic converter component is going to be a civil asset forfeiture component that would travel with it. My goal would be that's something we can offer in full committee when we have everybody on board and there's consensus. It's a workable framework. I did not want to, given the late date in the session, jeopardize the potential for this consensus work, which a lot of you all that are here worked on a very tight, careful equilibrium to make sure we've got this. I want to move that forward and let it not time out. I do believe there's a way forward for that catalytic converter piece in full committee, but I just don't want to do that on the fly and regret that we've not put our time in and dotted our I's and crossed our T's. So that, to the gentleman, I know we're waiting for the version for our committee members to see. Anything you'd like to share about that? Generally, your thoughts around moving forward. If only the $100 cash piece were to pass, I know that would disappoint some. Is that something you feel comfortable with us moving forward to full committee? Would you rather stay and work through catalytic converter and subcommittee?
No, I agree. My granddad always taught me to measure twice and cut once. So
Right.
I respect that. And hopefully we can get that worked out into full committee. But I do appreciate you hearing this bill as it is now with just the cash piece in. And I can actually speak to the cash piece without the,
Sure.
well, never mind. Here we go. But no, I would like for this to move forward. And if we're able to incorporate the catalytic converter piece in full committee, obviously I would appreciate that, but would like to move this forward for reasons that I said in the last committee hearing.
Okay, we have more coming out. Yep. I've got one already. If you want to share these out, you can. If you want to have someone join you again, this has been the work of you and your team.
Yes, sir.
We had a markup that came to me yesterday. We've worked through that. It should be reflected in this. Anything you want to point to here in 0526S before we take questions?
I guess for members that weren't here last time, this is a constituent brought this issue to me. He owns a recycling facility. In 2012, when we redid the metal theft statute, a lot of things were changed. One of the pieces that was incorporated was that recyclers could not give cash payments in exchange for scrap metal. And that was, originally was a deterrent for metal theft. There are, several other portions of that 2012 law that I believe are stronger, or a much stronger deterrent, having to take your picture, description of the metal being sold, license, signature, a lot of different pieces. And what I saw when I went and toured these facilities was people would come in and sell $15 worth of scrap metal. They'd have to get a check. If they don't have a bank account, it costs them $8 to cash that check. So it's a burden on the consumer, and it's also a burden on the recyclers who are spending approximately $5 per check when they have to write it. So this would just allow for cash payments under $100. And we have been working throughout this session on a carve out, which says that you cannot get cash for a catalytic converter, for an air conditioning coil, or for certain copper wire. And we think that this will not lead to an increase in metal theft. We think that the metal theft laws are strong now, but just in case, we do have a sunset provision in this bill, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Chair recognizes Representative McLaurin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, Senator. I really like the bill in its current form. Would be happy to support it, and tell all of my band of Democrats to support it too. I think that given the work you've been able to do to get here, my strong preference would be not to pick up the pieces that we've left out for sub and cut once. But if we're able to do that, this bill has my complete support. So it makes it's an obvious policy problem. It makes sense the way that you're doing it. So I appreciate your work on it. That's all I want to say.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Do have one or two questions. And again, we were speaking a little bit more broadly last time. Now that we've got language that we're contemplating passing, I think maybe there's a deeper dive. I do want to ask you about lines 168 and 209. The provisions of this code section shall not apply to any transaction, and then the clauses between business entities. What is in practice, the definition of business entities? I mean, I understand we have a clear picture of what we're trying to prevent. We're trying to prevent folks, going in and they're in their 1987 Datsun pickup truck with a bunch of metal in the back and, having bought it from someone who stole it from someone else and getting cash for it. And, I think though, stepping back from this, if I have an LLC that I've established, does an LLC give me complete end around all of this? Because I've got an LLC established. I mean, how does business entities function in practice in the marketplace?
Mr. Chairman, that's a great question. I know that is what is in the current law. And I honestly do not know the definition there, but if we've got a couple people in the audience that may be able to help. With that.
You get as many lifelines as you want to call in. This subcommittee, it's going to be less formal perhaps if it needs to be. Chair recognizes Mr. Brian Hudson for.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If it's okay, I think there's a few folks. Wow, that's pretty hot. Sorry. There's a few folks online. If I believe they've called in, that could probably address that certainly better than I can.
I've got computer audio on it. Again, I don't know that it's even a problem. I ask it because if there's some code cleanup we can address while we're doing it, now's the time to do it, but be glad to recognize somebody online.
Steve Levitan. Yes, he can address that. Thank you.
Okay, Steve.
Mr. Chairman, members, I'm Steve Levitan. I'm the Executive Vice President of Pull Apart. We're in the used auto parts business, but we've been very involved with this statute from its inception. And Mr. Chairman, you're right. This is language that has been in the statute from the beginning, and frankly has not caused any problems or issues. There is a carve out from that for transactions between secondary metals recyclers. So they are not exempt from those provisions. The other thing that, and I'm not sure where we are with the different versions, I haven't seen a copy yet, but we did want to make sure that, again, catalytic converters are not included as being able to be purchased for cash. And on the business to business exemption, we've made it clear that, again, for catalytic converters, those are not exempt. So they would still have to be, it'd have to be the same record keeping and the reporting provisions related to the purchase of catalytic converters.
Okay. The way the language reads in the substitute is lines 167, 168 of the subsection F. The provisions of this code section shall not apply to any transaction other than a transaction related to catalytic converters, between business entities. So again, business entity transactions related to catalytic converters would be within the applicability of this code section, but others are not. And this is where I'm sort of stepping back and asking if transactions between secondary metals dealers is included, but we're exempting others, what is the effect of shall not apply to transactions between other business entities? What does that mean? Does that mean if AT&T is buying brand new wire for a project, that's outside of the range of this? What is the practical effect of this? I just want to make sure we're clear on that.
It would be more the other way around if a secondary metals recycler is purchasing scrap copper from AT&T, it would be exempt from those provisions.
Okay, so a scrap provider to scrap provider, it is governed by it, but from business user to scrap provider, it's not, is what you're saying?
Correct. Yes, sir.
And if it were from, so AT&T could convey it to a demolition contractor could bring it in to a provider, and it's not governed by this. So you could have a cash payment over $100 if that were the circumstance. You could turn something in for $2,000 in cash.
That's correct. And that's the way it has been, again, since I believe it was 2008 with the original bill. And again, we've heard of no issues or problems or abuse of that provision.
I'm not trying to manufacture problems where there are none. I just saw that. It was curious to me. It just seems so easy to get around that. I mean, people are running around with LLCs doing all kinds of things. And I just, if you're doing this at any scale, I just don't, it seems to be a hole we've got in this that folks could exploit.
Mr. Chairman, we've, one of the other provisions in there, again, closes what could be considered a loophole in business-to-business transactions, where we carve out from regulation transactions involving a manufacturer or industrial provider or commercial provider that in the ordinary course of their business generates, and it says, or sells secondary metals, regulated metals. And the or should be changed to and. So again, to close a potential loophole. So someone can't say, I'm in the business of selling and therefore I'm exempt.
Okay. To the author, is that or and change picked up and captured in the substitute?
Mr. Chairman.
Could you share, do you know where that is? Put you on the spot.
One second. The witness that was testifying, could he repeat that, the or and? Because I thought I had an understanding of what he was getting at, but now I'm.
If you can give me 1 second, I'll find the citation on that.
But I'm, Mr. Chairman, just without having been asked this question, because this is existing law, I'm assuming, business to business, there may be certain tax documents or W-9s that are involved in the exchange of metal. And that may be why those were exempted to begin with. That's the only thing I could really think of. And that issue has not come up. And as the person who just testified said, it hasn't been of concern since the inception of the law, which I believe was in 2012 or 2008. So I think that may be why business entities were.
Mr. Chairman, that provision is only dealing with the cash, and all of the other records and record keeping requirements are still intact. The exemption that I was just referencing is at 10.1.358. And that's in number 6. A manufacturing, industrial, or other commercial vendor that generates, and it did say, or sells regulated metals property in the ordinary course of its business, provided that such vendor is not a secondary metals recycler. And we've suggested changing the or to an and, which tightens that provision significantly and eliminates a potential loophole that was unintended.
10.1.358 is outside of this bill.
It was in the Senate Bill 591 version as passed by the Senate. So again, we're splitting it out. Again, I would hope that that piece does not get lost, because it is tightening up the statute.
Do you have, Senator Hanson, do you have a version of the bill as passed the Senate?
I do, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at it right now.
We'll stand by while you find that piece. If that's something that needs to be added back in, we can.
It's on line 284.
284 of the as passed the Senate version.
That's right. 284 manufacturing, industrial, or other commercial vendor that generates, and then they struck or and added and sells regulated metal property.
I got you.
And I apologize, Mr. Chairman, this was the first time I saw the substitute when I was coming to committee today. So
Yeah, that was stricken from this bill. I think it was, that section was seen as being not other than catalytic converters. Okay. So we could conceivably put, should it be the pleasure of the committee, 1-5 from the previous bill back in as an amendment. As an amendment to the substitute, and make sure that language travels along with it before it goes to full committee. Okay. If that would be, I think that was just unintentionally struck. And again, the gentleman from Pull Apart, section 1-7 of the bill as passed the Senate, 10-1-359.3. Those revisions came out completely from the committee substitutes being proposed today. Okay. So Chair's going to recognize Representative Smith for a question. Sure. Okay. Okay. Senator, do you have anyone else you want to speak to the bill today?
no, Mr. Chairman.
I know there's some other folks that have an interest in the catalytic converter piece. If anyone's just recently joined us, the underlying bill we're passing today has the $100 cash piece. There may be an amendment made to pick up that cleanup language that was referred to online. And then again, there's still discussions about getting the catalytic converter language and the civil asset forfeiture language at a place that's ready for prime time. And to Chairman Burchett, you weren't in here when we said this. That would be, Mr. Chairman, an amendment offered in full committee, because we're not in a place that we can move on that with confidence. The CAF piece and the catalytic converter piece, I didn't want to keep this language we have confidence in from moving forward when there's still some uncertainty about that. So again, we've got a great coalition of folks that are supporting this. So with that, I'll give the author the last word before I entertain a motion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate once again you allowing this bill to be heard today and helping us push the part that everyone is at peace with through. And the amendment that you suggested, that was a good catch, adding back in section 1.5 from the original bill that passed through the Senate. That's something I would be in support of and would ask the committee to do if you wish, but would just ask for your favorable consideration of this piece of legislation.
Okay, well, to be in a posture to even be able to act on an amendment, the chair is going to recognize, open the committee up for a motion. Is there a motion? Going to move to pass from Representative McLaurin. Do I have a second? Got a second. So it's before us. Are any amendments? I think the amendment the gentleman had contemplated online, again, it's going to be the will of the committee, was to take, looking at SB 591 as passed the Senate, lines 268 through 286, and adding those back into the bill, because the changing or to an and was one of the core objectives in addressing this. And I don't know if there's any thoughts from members of the committee. If you want to have that restated and the purpose, I'm glad to retread that ground if we need to. Chair recognizes Representative McLaurin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will move that amendment as the chairman has laid it out.
Got a motion? Do I have a second? Got a second. Any discussion on the amendment? Once again, to our friend online, could you state for the committee members once again the substantive value of changing or to and in 284 through 286 of the bill? I'll let you put it in your words, not mine.
Mr. Chairman, again, Steve Levitan. This is by changing the or to an and, it requires that seller that is being exempted from the provisions to be both the generator of the scrap and the seller. As currently in the law, there's a potential loophole for someone to say, in the ordinary course of my business, I sell this material, but I wasn't the generator of it. So that has unfortunately in some other states been used as a loophole. We felt as the industry that loophole should be closed, and that's why it was included in our original draft.
Chair recognizes Chairman Burchett for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One question for the gentleman online. And I apologize if this was already answered. The generator provision, does that, can you just flesh out what a generator is?
That would be the person that's actually producing that scrap. So in the case of copper wire, as an example, an electrician would be the generator of that scrap, an electrical contractor. A flower shop, on the other hand, would not be a generator in the ordinary course of their business of copper wire. And they could still make that sale, but they'd be subject to all of the restrictions.
Would a muffler shop that does work on exhaust systems, would they be a generator?
They would be a generator of some types of scrap metal. They would certainly be a generator of catalytic converters. But again, and I know we're not taking that up at this point, but we did say other than catalytic converters. So regardless, we're carving out catalytic converters, which has become such a huge issue, the theft of those. And again, Georgia has a very good statute dealing with this. What has been offered, and I understand the controversy on the seizure and forfeiture side, but there are a couple of other provisions that tighten up what we already have in terms of who can possess, who can sell, who can advertise, and solicit for the purchase of catalytic converters. And that's language, frankly, that we work closely with law enforcement to develop.
Chair recognizes Vice Chairman Smith.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, thank you. Question I have, and anybody can answer it. How's this going to affect our junkyards?
When you're asking about junkyard, are you speaking about a metal like recycling facility?
I'm talking about an old fashioned junkyard. I've got one back between Tallapoosa and Waco. And I'm just trying to make sure my buddy Cotton Pritchett's not going to get in trouble by our changes here. I want to make sure flesh this out a little bit.
Does he purchase scrap metal?
He purchases used cars, crashed, totaled cars.
If he purchases just used cars, I don't know what the scrap value of used cars is, but if they're under $100, he would be able to give cash to someone bringing that in. If it's over $100, it won't change his business operation at all.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, we've got a motion to move on the amendment of adding lines 268 through 286 in the original as passed version into the committee substitute 0526S. Are there any more questions about the amendment? Is there objection to the adoption of the amendment? Any objection to the adoption of that amendment? Hearing none, the amendment's adopted. We've got before us a do pass recommendation of LC 2800526S as amended. Any further discussion? Arthur? Hearing none, all those in favor of sending it forward to full committee with a do pass recommendation, signify by raising your right hand. All opposed? Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
And for those who are here with us again, discussion continues with respect to the catalytic converter piece and the civil asset forfeiture piece. I'll linger around to talk through it. I know Chairman Burchett's got a full committee in 12 minutes, but I'll stick around for a minute if you want to have some discussion. And with that, we stand adjourned.
Thank you very much.